Hello, my name is Valerie Cordero, and I am co-executive director of Families for Depression Awareness. We are welcoming you to a wonderful topic today on breaking the stigma of suicide prevention in African American communities. I'm so glad to be joined by a special guest today. She will be here to explain a project that she worked on, also her work within the African American community around suicide prevention, and also her professional work. So I'm going to introduce her in just one moment, but I want to remind you that if you have questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to type them into whatever comment field. If you're on Facebook or somewhere else, just go ahead and type those questions in, and we will try to get to as many as possible. So I would like to introduce my co-presenter for today, Raven Alade. Raven Alade is a community health worker and certified health coach. A St. Louis native, Raven earned her Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a minor in Africana Studies at the University of Central Missouri in 2018. She also completed a Master's of Education in Community Development and Action from Vanderbilt University in 2020. Among several interests, Raven has a heart for the mental health and overall wellness of racially marginalized communities and is interested in dismantling the taboos, stigmas, and shame associated with suicidality within the context of the church, family, and society at large. With that, I welcome Raven. Hello, Raven. How are you?
Hi, I am well, Valerie. I am so excited to be here and thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here to speak with us. I'd like to start by asking you to discuss with our audience today, what is your connection to the topic of suicide prevention, and why is this important to you?
Yeah, so I thought about this earlier when I was looking over the questions, and it was funny because it just dropped down in me where I thought like suicide prevention, it wasn't something that I was looking for. It actually found me. I wasn't searching after like, oh, I'm interested really in suicide. I've always been interested in mental health. And, my undergrad was in psychology, and I have future plans to go on to being a psychologist and counsel people, but suicide wasn't necessarily something that I was interested in. Like I said, it found me. So in around 2018, it was a very, very difficult year. I entered a mission trip after I was graduating from college. And on that mission trip, I noticed as becoming a leader of the mission trip after the adult staff left. So it was, let me just give you context. It was around 60 students on this mission trip in Orlando, Florida. And I was one out of the 4 people who was selected to be a leader, which was very humbling and honoring to do. But once our adult staff left, immediately it was chaos happening. And one of the chaotic things was that we had a suicide watch of one of the people who was on our trip, and we had to work through making sure this person went back home because they weren't going to be able to finish the mission. So that happened, and then after the mission trip, thankfully, we were able to get that person, safely back home. But then the mission trip ended. I went on to grad school, moved to Nashville, and a week into my program, I learned of a very close person to me who passed away to what is believed to be suicide. So I had to, you're a professional, you have your PhD, you know how grad school is for students. So just the fact of enduring that in my first week of grad school was very, very just hard to deal with. So I dealt with that. And then on my Thanksgiving break, someone very close to me as well was talking about suicide and making that a plan of action. So it was rough. 2018 was very rough just to encounter those 3 different situations. So when I was in grad school that first semester, which was also very hard, I wanted to kind of tackle in and go deeper into my understanding of suicide. So I wanted to learn more about people who look like me and addressing like, what is research talking about with suicide in Black people? I'm interested. I'm really interested in trying to tackle this. And then I wanted to go deeper with, I identify as a Christian. So I wanted to see how this relates to Christianity and how Black people are addressing this in the church, because I knew it was a stigma. I knew it was things said like, well, you can just pray that away. Or, what goes on in this house stays in this house, or just all of these things that was said. And I didn't know if I necessarily agree with. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that if you die by suicide, oh, you're going straight to hell. So it was all these different things going on. And I'm like, hold on, let's kind of pause and see what I can do and how I can, work through understanding more about suicide regarding Black people. And then I had another, like I said, I'm a believer. So I really feel like this was the Lord leading me. And he brought back to my memory that, oh, Raven, don't you remember, like, you were suicidal too? Like, you wanted to kill yourself too. So it goes back to that. And if I have time, if we have time, I did want to share that story, a part of this, because he brought to my memory how when I was 15 years old, I wanted to kill myself. I had the plan. I took some pills and I drank some water thinking I wasn't going to wake up again, thinking that my life would be over. And because of that situation, I am here today. Because of all these situations, unfortunately, brought the culmination of the project at large, of me being an advocate for suicide prevention, of me wanting people to heal, because this is not a taboo. It's something that is impacting everybody, and it hits Black people differently. So yeah, that's kind of like why suicide prevention is such an interest for me, and how it found me. I didn't find it.
Can you talk more about some of those messages that you may have gotten growing up in Black community and Black family around mental health? And then also talk about what was it that brought you out of that suicidal place? And you said you made a suicide attempt. What brought you out of that? So can you talk about those two things?
Yeah, so growing up, honestly, for me, I'm 25 years old. So this is I'm born in 1995. And so I'm growing up early 2000s. Suicide wasn't talked about. I went to a predominantly Black church, Baptist church, which, part of my suicide story was that church was a buffer for me. I wanted to, I was excited. I wasn't a kid that fell asleep in church. I actually loved praising God and, enjoying the sanctuary and people, seeing people, hearing the sermon, all of that. Like that was like life-giving to me. But at home and throughout like me going to school and different things of that nature, I didn't really have a escape. And I can go more into my story, but yeah, we didn't never talk about suicide. And any messages I heard was just like, this is bad, this is wrong, like you're going straight to hell. It was no like in between of even talking about what suicide was, like how this can impact somebody, how can somebody come to this result of their life, or even if somebody would go to hell by dying by suicide, which I know is a whole nother rabbit hole. But I just wanted to know more of the truth once these things were hitting my doorstep, once I was losing people by suicide. And shoot, even think about myself, I didn't think I was going to hell, I just didn't want to be here. So what was your second question, Valerie?
Yeah, I wanted you to talk more about, you mentioned the suicide attempt that you had, and I just wanted to know, thankfully you're still here and you're still with us, and you've used all of these experiences to really be able to help other people. So that we're very happy about. But what was the reaction of your family? Did you receive support after that? What about your church community? Or is this something that you all didn't really talk about and people didn't know that this even happened?
Right. Thank you for restating that. So with my suicide attempt, nobody really knew at all. I told a few friends, and at the time I was 15 years old. I told a few friends that that's something I wanted to do. And I mean, 15-year-olds, I'm not saying this is all 15-year-olds, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say, or at least not then. We didn't have the resources or a list sheet of like, here's some risk factors, here are some warning signs of suicide. So nobody really knew. My family knew that I wasn't really, comforted, and I was kind of depressed. I was to myself. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I just wanted to be by myself. But it wasn't really something that we worked through. And it's only by the grace of God that I'm here. The reason I'm speaking to you, the reason I was able to do narratives of Black taboo suicide, the reason that I can even talk about this is because that God and like He brought me out of that. It was such a tumultuous time. And just a little bit about my story, like I said, I can go deeper, is the fact that when I was a young kid, I grew up prematurely, 2 pounds and 15 ounces, and I was fighting for my life. And I had some birth defects, and one of the birth defects was having strabismus, which is an eye deficiency where your eyes will be misaligned. So growing up, I was I was bullied. Well, not necessarily bullied, but just talked about a lot. I had low self-esteem. I had depression. I didn't really understand why I was here, if I was a mistake. Like if my eyes were looking a certain way, or if people were looking over their shoulder to look at me, like what was the point of that? And just me also being kind of overweight in nature as a kid, it was very hard to really just believe that like I was valued, because I didn't see value. I was in, you're in school most of your years when you're a child, and I didn't really see a value of living. I was just so hurt, and even professors talked about me, like making jokes about me as well. So with that, and going home and not really, feeling like I was seen or heard, and not to, put against my wonderful parents, but that's just what it was. Like they, as an adult, you have your own things going on too. And sometimes you can easily miss what's going on with your child, especially if you have stressors that's happening. So it just, I felt so alone and not comforted. And I didn't understand why God had me here. I questioned Him. I cried every night. It took music as a form of healing sometimes for me to even want to, keep going every day, because I did not want to, be here. So it was a struggle. But what kind of brought me out of that was me, after that suicide attempt, was that I saw that, well, God woke me up, so I must be here for a purpose. So it didn't immediately go away like the suicidal thoughts, but it wasn't as pressurizing, and the depression wasn't as deep as well. And I wanted to change my perspective, and I sought God more to see if this is, let me see about this whole life thing. And after some time, things became better, and I started to love and care about myself more and more, and not worry about what others who are very flawed human beings as well cared. So.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I know that's probably difficult to relive, even telling that. We want to remind anybody who's watching today, if you know somebody who might be dealing with suicidal thoughts, we have some resources on our website. If there's somebody who you know who's in crisis, we'll probably tell you all this multiple times. You can call the crisis text line, you can text the crisis text line, or you can call 1-800-273-TALK. And I'm going to ask my fellow staff members to put that in the chat, and we'll put those numbers up as well. But thank you for sharing that. I want to talk more. And also we have some comments that you are so brave, you're so accomplished. Thank you for. We're really happy that you're still here. Let's talk more about your project. So the project that you worked on as a graduate student, it's called Narratives of the Black Taboo Suicide Project. Is that the full title? That's right?
Yeah, Narratives of Black Taboo
Suicide. Mm-hmm. So what made you spoke a little bit about that, but what exactly was that project? And I know you did gather some stories from folks. So talk to us about the project, and then also share with us some stories that you gathered, and even ones that stand out to you a little bit.
Yeah. So Narratives of a Black Taboo Suicide, it was my master's level final project. We had the opportunity to either do a thesis or a project. And me, as a researcher, as an academic, I'm very creative. So I like to kind of go against the grain with tradition. And thankfully, my program allowed me to do that. I had a lot of hardships to get to the point of even creating Narratives of a Black Taboo, with IRB issues and people not thinking that this would be suitable work for my program. But by the help of a lot of like my advisor and community partners, I was able to get it completed. So it was an autoethnographic autoethnographic account. It's hard to say that word.
Autoethnographic account?
Yes,
There we
autoethnographic
go.
account. Thank you. About how I wanted to share my story, but I also wanted to go to the stories of other Black Christians who dealt with suicide, whether it was them or they lost somebody by suicide. So this story was, this curation was all about trying to connect the dots of something that happened in the past with slavery, utilizing real life accounts of courageous people who want to share their stories, sharing resources, and also making acknowledged statements of who helped me along the way, as well as just the curation, like the process, like the methodology and the process, so readers can really look at the process of how I even created narratives of Black taboo. So it started with me, like I said, on my journey in 2018, starting grad school. I wanted to go deeper with understanding Black suicide, and I wanted this project to be such a project that can heal others. Like I wanted this project to be a project where others can feel like they can breathe. Like I literally wanted breath to come out of this project, because I knew that if somebody read this and saw a story that they can see themselves in, then maybe they will have a will to live a little bit longer. So it wasn't just a master's level project. It was a project for purpose. It was a project to help somebody want to live. It was a project to help somebody or help some other people break the stigma that they learned about in their church years ago and ingrained in their mind, like, oh, this is the way that it should be, when it's not. This shouldn't be a taboo for Black people to talk about. Mental health is real. We do not have to just be superheroes like we think we do, or we just have to deal with it because we've been through generational trauma. But it's something that it just take you a step back and be like, hold on, no, we need to address this issue, because Black people, tons of Black people go through this issue. And I learned it through the process of creating this project. So I had the opportunity to be an intern for the Tennessee Suicide Prevention, the Tennessee State Department of their suicide prevention team. So they were able to get the word out about my project, and I had a lot of people reach out to me. Now, I only wanted to.
I was going to ask that, and that's a question that we have in the audience too. Was it difficult finding people?
No.
That's good to hear, because that means more people were willing to talk about it.
I think the only reason I didn't have difficulty is because I was an intern for the Tennessee suicide prevention team. So I was in a place where they can just easily reach out to the network and constituents and say, hey, this project is going on. Do you know anybody who, or you yourself would like to participate? So I was getting a lot of calls and a lot of emails, but within the first day of this project being on the email circuit. And I know that was only because I was placed in that internship, which I'm forever grateful for, to get those emails. So like I said, that part wasn't hard. It was just kind of even making narratives of Black taboo happen with the IRB process. So
not everybody might know what the IRB process is, but whenever you're working with human subjects, whenever you're interacting with people for the purposes of research, you need to have proper approvals to make sure that you are not taking advantage of any vulnerable populations, or that the questions that you've set up or the process that you're going through will be suitable for human subjects, which is scientific way of saying it, but it's a good process to make sure that people aren't taken advantage of or otherwise put their mental or physical health in danger through a research project. But talk to us a bit about some of the people that you profiled. And as I think I asked before, were there certain stories that stayed with you and that you still think about today?
Yeah. So every person who participated were amazing. It's hard to even choose, but I think the person that I'm thinking about, and this person was anonymous. She was, it was the second to last story in my booklet. She was a lady who lost her husband to suicide. And the reason why she stood out to me to speak about right now is because I was able to interview her over FaceTime. So other people, I don't think I interviewed anyone. No, I didn't interview anyone over video chat. or they sent them in, or it was just a regular phone call. But this was FaceTime. So I was able to see some of her expressions. I was able to see her kids who lost their father. I was able to, even see, she showed me pictures of them. She showed me the picture of the family right before her husband passed away, before he took his life, the same night. And one of the most, it was so beautiful, but hard to hear and be there with her. Aspects about the interview was the fact that she interviewed in the same room that he took his life. So I was just kind of like honored to be able to walk through that with her and process that with her, but also just in shock, like, wow, this is hard. And it was hard for me to, as a researcher, to even encounter this and engage with this, but I wouldn't change anything for the world. And part of that story was just this lady and her husband. They were just head over heels for each other. They had beautiful kids, but it was just a hard life for her husband, who he kind of went through a lot of different bouts with depression in his life. And he chose a day to take his own life, and he shot himself in a room.
Well, I know that there's some people here who might be a little triggered by some of this discussion. So, and that's okay. I understand that for a lot of people, I mean, you may think that if you lose a loved one, you can just move the next day, or you can just, you can change your life to not think about it. But number one, not everybody has that ability to leave. So it's unfortunately, it's sad to hear, but it's not surprising that they still live in the home where they were before. And also that people, people are still grieving and find that that experience just as potent 2 years later, 3 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, as it was when it happened. So I'm sure that it was very difficult to hear those stories. I'm going to put up once again, as I said, we're going to show throughout. Thank you to my coworkers who've provided these resources so that we can make sure people are seeing. If you are struggling with suicidal thoughts and or you know somebody who is, please be sure to either contact the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There's also, I'm going to put up here the crisis tech support information. So what, Raven, can you talk about what were some of the themes that came out of this work? You showed several stories, or you highlighted several stories of people. What's something that you learned from doing this project? Or like I said, what were some themes that came out of capturing these different stories, but something that you feel like you could share with everyone listening today, that we may learn more about suicide in the Black community or prevention of suicide?
Yeah, so one of the themes, a centering theme, was that the Black men in the project, they use more lethal means, and I know that's consistent with research, at least, that they use more lethal means to try either attempt or unfortunately take their own life. And something that I definitely learned was that every one of us we're different in the way that we have processed or handled or just gone through like suicidal attempts, or even processing through the healing journey. And I think if anybody read the booklet, which is open for the public, that they would see that all of these stories are vastly like unique and for the personality of the person who's telling it. And even if I interviewed them and wrote the words, it was them who confirmed that this is what they would say. And this was really wonderful for me to learn, because through the process, I still constantly learned that even though we might share an ethnic identity, that none of us are monolithic. We are valuable and we are individual, and we need to be taken seriously with our hurts and our pains and our struggles. And it was some other things that I knew that I wrote down in my booklet. I'm trying to find them because I wanted to probably mentioned some of them, but one of them I could say off the top of my head was the connection to slavery. I'm a huge proponent of reflecting back to the past to acknowledge the present and enslaved people who endured the degradation of all their trauma and hurts. I think the remnants of a lot of stuff they went through is still present in today's Black community. So it just kind of like made the truth of narratives of a Black taboo not even being a thing for Black people. This is not a taboo. This is real. This has been happening for centuries. From the inception of us being here in this world, suicide has happened. And even from my biblical perspective, suicide has happened throughout, unfortunately, in the Bible as well. So it's nothing new up under the sun when it comes to this hard issue of suicide. And again, I just want to make sure that people feel safe even in this while I'm speaking, because I know I said some hard things, and I'm glad you put up the 1-800 number because this is not easy to talk about, and this is not easy to even listen to. So I just want people to just feel encouraged even with what I'm saying, because what the goal of what I'm doing and why I'm even speaking about this is for other people to heal. I told God I wouldn't even talk about this stuff ever. And then now I'm here on a platform speaking about it. So it's hope. And yeah, I just want people to know that there's hope.
Thank you, Raven. I agree that there's hope, and part of dispelling any stigma around mental health for African Americans is talking about it and talking about it openly, being open if you believe in therapy, if you sought therapy yourself, if you talking about mental health as a medical condition as opposed to some failing in moral character or weakness. These are some messages that have permeated through our culture for a long time, and it's time to really work against that. We know that Ari brought up a really great point. Ariel Cohen wrote here, it's alarming to see that suicide rates, see the suicide rates that are rising among Black youth. One other thing that's crucially important to talk about, especially because the pandemic's going along, a lot of youth of color receive mental health services through their schools, the school counselor, the school social worker, and that might be the only mental health care that they're getting. And now that schools have been closed due to COVID-19, there's a danger for all kids in general, for kids of color in specific, to not have anyone to talk to about these issues. So do you have any suggestions for how we can help Black youth and families today? You're in your 20s, so still relatively young, but what are some things that you think would help young people, either like yourself or young people who might be teenagers and are dealing with feelings of suicidal ideation?
Well, the suggestions I have for families is simply, it's really simple, and it's to listen. I think that's one of the huge markers of just helping somebody through suicidal ideations or wanting to attempt is to listen to them. Open your heart and listen, because they may have a lot to say, or they may not have much to say right now, but just the fact that you're there to listen to them and for them to feel valued and seen as a human being, that can go so much further to other preventative measures that you can make. But I think to start with just simply listening to help them cope through some things and to help them process out what they're thinking, and process out even the thought of they might not even necessarily want to kill themselves. They just want to end the pain. I knew I did. And if somebody would listen to me and somebody would be there just as an encouraging ear, and not just like, oh, hey, how you doing? Okay, bye. Not that surface level of asking, how are you? But actually like looking into somebody's eyes and seeing like if they have pain in their eyes, and asking like, hey, are you okay? Like, and being able to go there, meet them where they are, and just listen and hear what they have to say, and not being, even if you are afraid, go there anyway, because you might help alleviate a life being not here anymore.
I think those are wonderful suggestions. I'd like to know more about the work that you are doing today, and if you see any intersections with the work you're doing today and your project.
Yes, ma'am. So the work I'm doing today actually is different than like my aspiring goals of being a counselor and a psychologist. But I'm a community health worker, and mainly part of my work today is to keep people out of the hospital who constantly go into the hospital. And I address social determinants of health, and all that means is just barriers to healthcare that may be food, housing, mental health, um, transportation, anything in their environment that may be causing them a barrier to get proper access to care. I am, as a community health worker, supposed to help them. So I know an intersection that comes up is mental health, because you can want to keep somebody out the hospital. They might not even want to go to the hospital themselves. But the fact that if their mind is not right, if they don't feel like it, they won't go seek more preventative health care measures. They don't want to hear you talk about, well, did you make a primary care appointment, or did you go get your medication today? No, they want to. Sometimes a lot of our patients, and I can speak for my team, they just want somebody like to listen to them. They want somebody to listen and hear what they're going through, because they're not thinking about their health right now. They're thinking about all the other stuff that they're going through, and they would just like for somebody to listen. A lot of patients just entrust us. It's like many counselors, honestly, because it's not a lot of people just taking time out to simply listen. So I definitely feel like that intersection come in, and I have had to ask a question regarding suicide, because I don't want nobody on my watch to take their own life. If I can help in any way to get them to the proper care they need, then that's my goal, because I'm not afraid to go there and meet them where they are.
And you bring up a really good point that we should reiterate in this conversation. Asking somebody if they're thinking of taking their lives and if they have a plan does not plant the idea in their head. Rather, it gives somebody the opportunity to express what's going on with them. And if in fact they are thinking about taking their own lives, and they have a plan and they have means to take their own lives, that would be an alert to you to make sure that they get some help immediately. So by either taking them to a local emergency room, which nowadays is a lot more fraught than it used to be, but if it's a situation where somebody has a way to take their lives immediately, it calls for immediate interventions. There are places around the country that do have mobile crisis support that families can access, or if you're not family, it's you can just look up in your usually you can Google in your city or town if there's a mobile crisis unit that can come out and assess the situation. If you've talked to a person and you ask them if they're suicidal and they express that they don't have a plan to take their lives, but they are thinking about not being here anymore, they are feeling very, very down, that's a time to intervene and see if you can help them find resources like a therapist, like getting a medical evaluation to see if they have what their diagnosis actually is. So those are tips that we want to give to folks today. So I'd like to know, Raven, the work that we talked about with the Taboo Project, as well as your regular work, is very emotionally taxing. So what do you do to take care of yourself? How do you keep yourself well? Because those of us in helping professions can experience burnout, and especially as we've seen a lot during this pandemic, and a lot of people of color, more people of color now are accessing mental health services, which is good. But those providers of color who are there to take care of us are maybe getting 50 new clients, 100 new clients, and they can be at risk for burnout too. So what do you do to take care of yourself as a person in a helping profession?
That's a great question, Valerie. I love to laugh. I love to just have like time with my friends and bring up memories, laugh, because I think laughter is just keep you youthful. It's a lot to laugh about, because it's a lot to cry about, but it's a lot to laugh about too. So I try not to take it as serious, because I know that this stuff that I care about is serious. I know that, I like to say I have the gift of mercy and encouragement. So that's draining. So I have to like find different ways just to laugh and just be carefree, because I know that whatever else I have to do within the workday, it might be a heavy hit. I love to walk and be outside. Oh my goodness. if I can go on a hike or something of that sort, I love to do that. I love movies. I love dancing, even though I don't really know how to dance. I love to dance. I love to be in my car and sing different songs and dance at the same time. I don't know what it is about the car, but I love it. It's soothing to me just to be in the car and dance and sing, even though I don't know how to do both. I like to color. I like to journal. Honestly, protective factor for me, I said I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, so I like to pray and I like to read my word. That's soothing to me. That's healing for me. I love to just enjoy like time with my, like I said this already, but my friends and my family too, like to enjoy them. I think this pandemic has showed me a lot, like the fact that so many people have passed away from COVID-19, just to enjoy somebody a little bit longer. Take a little more time out of that conversation, make it longer, make it more 10 minutes longer. I also love to bake and I love to cook different things. So it's a slew of things that I try to figure out to just like have a good time in life. Like I think this life is supposed to be enjoyed in the midst of adversity. Like it's not just about the hardships, but it's about enjoying the fullness of life and overcoming, because I've overcome a lot and I'm not stopping now because I've been a fighter since I was a little kid, since I was a baby. That was 215. So I'm not stopping. I'm going forth in this life and I'm going to make sure that I enjoy it the best that I can.
We've talked some about takeaway messages from your project, but from our conversation today, what would you like people to hold and think about and maybe take from this conversation that we've had? It's been a hard, it's definitely a hard topic, and suicide something that we don't want to discuss because it brings up a lot of feelings that are uncomfortable or painful. And so we are having this important discussion today in order to break a little bit of that stigma and let people know it's okay to talk about these issues. And especially in African American or Black communities, we need to do more to address these issues so that we can find our own healing and our own wellness. So what do you want people to take from this conversation today?
I want people to take from this conversation, honestly, that they are, and I don't want to even sound cliche, but honestly, that they are seen and they are valued and they are cared for. And if they can just see some type of light, like, when you look in a tunnel and it might be a smidget of light in there, to take hold of that light and to see where that tunnel can go, so you can even expand that light even further till you see a fullness of light. I don't think it's just supposed to be dark in that tunnel. I think that light comes through for a reason. And if you just have a little bit of strength, little by little, it doesn't have to be much, but each day, just little by little, taking hold of the steps to get to that light, then it can go to something bigger than you can imagine, bigger than you ever thought of. If you can just take hold of that, just day by day, one step at a time. It's not a race. It's just a journey. And adversity and suicide attempts and ideations and all of that hardship, it can be used for opportunity for greatness. I'm here today because of the pain that I experienced years ago, and still sometimes those suicidal thoughts can come again just because it happens. But you have the tools and resources to fight back when you know what you're up against. So I just want anybody who's listening to believe that those thoughts can be fought, whether it's medication, whatever your belief system is, or your protective factors. There's ways to get help, and people do actually still care. Everybody is not bad in the world. It's hope out there, and it's not a cliche. It's somebody that has lived experience that's telling you that. So I think that's kind of where I would leave that at.
That's a beautiful message, Raven. Raven Alade, thank you so much for your participation today. We're going to make sure that we make Raven's project available on our website, familyware.org. We'll put a link there for folks who are interested in reading more. We want to remind anyone listening today that if you or a loved one are struggling with suicidal thoughts, that you can call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Anyone, including young people, can use the crisis text line in order to get support. We want you to take care of yourself, take care of your family members. Remember, self-care is extremely important. There's no shame about seeking medical care, about seeking therapy, doing whatever it takes to keep yourself well. We want you to be here. We want people to be loved. So thank you so much. Thank you, Raven, and thank you for everyone who listened today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.